have a Bible IQ question, and our Bible IQ question is fascinating. It begins with this question from Betty, and Betty writes this question. We'll put it up on the screen. Why do we celebrate Good Friday and Easter Sunday? Is that 3 days in the grave according to Matthew 12:40? How do we know the resurrection was real? Thank you. How do we know the resurrection was real? Well, Betty, that's a great question, and I would simply say that it's important to understand that being a Christian, the resurrection is a key factor. And let me just say that the celebration of Easter has been a church decision since around the early 5th century. And in the 8th century, it was the worship of the German goddess of light, Teutonik, Tuntonic, the celebration of her, where the time of day and night is exactly the same because the sun passes over the equator. So they worship that, and it was in that time that they decided to take the official title of the celebration of light, and they decided to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The only time in the Bible where Easter is ever mentioned is in the King James Version, and it is in Acts chapter 12. Here's what it says. Now about that time, Herod the king stretched out his hand to harass some of the church. Herod was a political person who called himself Jewish. And then verse 2, he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword. He killed him. So James was struck. And because he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to seize Peter also. Now, it was during the days of unleavened bread. Now that is mentioned, of course, in the time of the New King James, or the King James Version, it's mentioned as Easter. Now that's fascinating because Easter is the time of Passover, because they were trying to communicate it was the time of Passover. So let me ask you a question. This is a long answer to this question. The time of Passover, when they celebrate the coming out of slavery into freedom, this is the time that Peter is placed in the prison by Herod. Fascinating. A lot of people don't mention this and talk about it, but I do because I love it. Peter, therefore, verse 5, was kept in prison, but constant prayer offered to God for him by the church. The time of Passover. Constant prayer was offered. And when Herod was about to bring him out, that night Peter was sleeping bound with 2 chains between 2 shoulders. And the guards, or between 2 soldiers, and the guards before the door kept him in prison. He was kept there very securely. Now behold, an angel of the Lord stood by him, by Peter. And light shone in the prison, and he struck Peter on the side and raised him up, saying, "Arise quickly." And suddenly the chains fell off him. He was no longer enslaved. Now let's understand that Peter was in prison because he was using the name of Jesus Christ. The angel, the church was in constant prayer, and the angel comes and the chains are gone. Then the angel said to him, "Gird yourself, tie on your sandals." So he did so, and he said to them, "Put on your garment and follow me." Time of the Passover, time of when we celebrate what God did in Passover by freeing Israel out of Egypt. So Peter gets up and follows the angel. So he went out and followed him and did not know what was done by the angel. He did not realize it was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. Well, when they were past the first and the second guard post, they came to the iron gate that leads to the gates, or leads to the city, which opened to them of its own accord. And they went out and went down the street, And immediately the angel departed from him. And when Peter had come to himself, he said, "Now I know for certain that the Lord has sent his angel and has delivered me from the hand of Herod and from the expectation of the Jewish people." I could say a whole lot of things here about Passover and about freeing from slavery. I won't, but I could. And Peter went down to the house. He went down and considered this as he came to the house of Mary, John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. And as Peter knocked at the door of the gate, the girl named Rhoda came to answer him. When she recognized Peter's voice because of her gladness, she did not open the gate. Like you're praying for this guy, and he's outside, and you don't open the gate? Like, what is wrong with you? Anyway, she did not open the gate, but ran in and announced, "Peter stood before the gate." But they said to her, "You are beside yourself. You're crazy." Yet she kept insisting, so they went and they said, "Is it his angel?" They figured he was dead. Now Peter continued to knock, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. But motioning to them with his hands to keep silent, he declared to them how the Lord had brought him out of prison. And he said, "Go and tell these things to James and the other brethren." And he departed and went to another place. Now, this happened in the time of the Passover. So that's the setting of Acts 12, the only place in the King James Version where Easter shows up. Let me come back to the word Easter. The word Easter originally was from this goddess, but the church changed that. And they made the celebration of God's resurrection at that time. And they celebrate it. It seems to me if you were to put it in that space, it would not fit because he was 3 days in the ground. That's how they proved he was dead. And if you don't think he was dead, I mean, there's so much on that. I could refer you to 6 different books that are all about that. Nobody questions whether Jesus was here and alive. Nobody questions that. Nobody questions whether they killed him. But the question comes with the resurrection. Our Jewish friends, who I love tremendously, they teach that Jesus was an imposter. In my view, he is not an imposter. He is God. I'm just saying that. So they call me non-Jewish. However, with Paul the Apostle, who was Jewish, he says that we are grafted in. So we are the finishing of the Jewish faith, if you would. So I would suggest to you that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is absolutely real because Christianity is alive. And I've seen the Lord resurrect people. I've seen the Lord change people who were dying. They were headed down the wrong path, and God has healed. He healed my arm. He's healed all kinds of things. He's healed several different ways. And also I've had surgeries healed that way too. So we are people that recognize that God rose from the dead because of the healing. The resurrection of the dead brings us to the place where we understand that Jesus would not be here, or we would not be here following Jesus Christ if he was not alive. His body, you can't find his body. They haven't been able to find his body because he rose from the dead. So that's very, very important. So I would say he was seen by over 500 people according to the Bible. And I would suggest to you, if you want to take this study, you're not going to answer it in 15 minutes on YouTube or on this channel, or you're going to answer it by reading Evidence Demands a Verdict, new series, Evidence Demands a Verdict book by Josh McDowell. I strongly recommend that. It's very good. So the question is, how do we know the resurrection is real? Look at me. Look at everybody. Now, keep this in mind. We don't, if somebody sings Beethoven, if somebody is a musician and they conduct Beethoven's symphony and somehow they mess it up, you don't blame Beethoven, do you? You blame the person who is re-singing it. Christians make mistakes. They mess it up. You don't make a decision about God based on the people. You make a decision about God based on God. Taste and see that he is well and good. And there are many people who have changed their lives dramatically. My life has been changed dramatically. And I would suggest to you that you don't hold God to a person here on earth, because God is not here on earth anymore. He sits at the right hand of the Father. He was raised in the flesh on the third day, because that's how they told you were dead. And if you want to explore how they killed him, there's many doctors' explanations about that. Another book that's good is The Skeleton in God's Closet by Dr. Paul Meyer. I've read that several times. It's a novel. It's just a great book. And it talks about a situation where they believe that they found the body of Jesus Christ. Very interesting book. He's a wonderful Christian. So that's what I would say to you. We know that Jesus is alive. I know that Jesus is alive because I have changed. Okay, Kevin, go ahead. What do you think?
Yeah, Pastor Rod, I have nothing to add from what you said to the first question. And just quickly, I'll add for the second question, how do we know the resurrection was real? Just like you said, you know, we have the testimonies of countless Christians who have experienced Jesus and new life in him. And also one point that really hits home for me is, if you look at the disciples, they pretty much all were killed, martyred for their faith. And so why would someone give up their life for something that's not real? These men were walking with Jesus. They talked with Jesus. They lived with Jesus. Even if they conspired together and tried to figure some way to pull the wool over everybody's eyes and make up this story, if it wasn't real, why would they allow their lives to be taken? They left everything to follow Jesus, you know, and they had the opportunity at that time to go back to what they were coming from, right? And even if a couple of the disciples died a martyr's death, why would everybody continually follow down that road? So the eyewitness accounts, the fact that they died, they died the martyr's death, and also the word of our testimony. We know we can proclaim the resurrection of Jesus because we have been transformed, just as Pastor Rod was saying. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents on that second part to the question.